Thomas Sowell talked about how it was a myth for his people to live by. And I can't even talk about that on a podcast without being canceled by the internet. I think there are certain facts that you're not allowed to talk about. I don't really want to talk about it.
Yeah, what are those certain facts though, Pearl? I mean, I'm a little on Ethan's side here. Does she believe in her heart of hearts that slavery was not that bad and that it was made to seem worse?
You can disavow it. That would be super easy to say I was wrong.
Interview where I'm quoting somebody. Like if you watch the full
misquoting somebody, our beloved Thomas Sowell. You bitch. That's so awful.
All right, let's talk about one last thing.
Like a creepy, probably. Yeah.
One last thing. Finally,
you know, it's combative, but
we made it, Sitch.
I think
we
it's
survived.
A good conversation. I wanted to ask you about one last thing.
One more thing.
This comment I thought was interesting, and tell me what you think about it.
This sounds similar to the slavery stuff too, because that's literally the founder of, or the guy who made Roots said I wanted a myth for my people to live by. So they often, but that's what they do is they embellish, and I'm not trying to say it wasn't horrible, it was.
Right.
But they want to make it like more horrible so that they can.
So it's interesting. This is the first time I've watched the conversation. I only heard this before. Look at Ethan's face. Okay.
So they often, but that's what they do is they embellish, and I'm not trying to say it wasn't horrible, it was.
Right.
But they want to make it like more horrible so that they can control people.
So in what way was slavery made to seem more horrible than it was?
So on one hand, I think it's totally fair to ask someone, you have an interview with them or / debate with them, you want to ask them about all their hot takes, that's fine. But it's very obvious that this is like a
gotcha.
Gotcha dunk attempt, right?
Oh yeah, he's
this
loving
big
it.
Smile on his face. He's like,
he's got the Lance from the Surf's grin going.
Yes, right.
He's like, ha ha! Look what I did.
Right now,
got you, bitch.
She doesn't answer the question. Spoiler warning. Because I don't know what the fuck she means by this either.
Well, and she's, for those of you that are listening, you might not know, but she's talking to Nick Fuentes.
Oh,
in the video.
That's another
more horrible so that they can control people.
So in what way was slavery made to seem more?
You know, he doesn't bring that up. And to me, that would be the key thing to bring up in the first place.
Right.
You're talking to an overt white nationalist about how slavery is, like, was portrayed to be worse than it really was.
More horrible than it was.
We were talking about, and I don't really want to go into this too much because we're kind of past this, but I was quoting a Thomas Sowell book.
Mm-hmm.
Sowell.
Okay.
Who's that?
Yeah. So Thomas Sowell's an
proves himself dipshit of the century.
He doesn't know who Thomas Sowell
is. He doesn't know who. Look, the guy looks like he's in his 40s. He doesn't know who Thomas Sowell is.
Thomas Sowell.
What a dumbass.
Sowell.
Author who talks about the history of slavery. So.
Thomas Sowell. Oh, so, but do you... So,
look, Ethan is Googling Thomas Sowell.
Well, I don't even know what does Thomas Sowell even say?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I don't trust Pearl's interpretation of anything in this conversation.
I doubt Thomas Sowell is making the argument that slavery wasn't that bad. I've read a lot of Thomas Sowell books.
Right.
And that would literally jump off the page at me.
Right.
When as soon as Thomas Sowell starts making the quackademic agent argument, I'm going, whoa.
Well, I'm sure he's probably talked about saying that there was some ideas that are part of a trope that aren't true. I'm sure he's probably talked about that. But I don't know what exactly it is. That I'm curious as to what that is, though.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if James Burnham made this argument. That would not surprise me at all.
Right.
And I've only read one James Burnham book, but it seems like he kind of borderlined on this argument in that book. But Thomas Sowell, I never heard Thomas Sowell make this kind of argument.
Well, yeah, but no. You're you're sort of jumping ahead here. You're
Mhm.
saying you never heard them make the argument that slavery wasn't so bad. That's not really what she said.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's actually, that is kind of what she said, but she wasn't very clear, right? I'm sure Thomas Sowell has talked about there being myths to slavery, but not necessarily that they were so like that it wasn't so bad.
The myths to slavery. Well, I mean,
Let me see. Let me look it up. Let me
She's
see if he
saying that
talks
the
about it.
myth about slavery is that it was horrendous. Like they've basically made it mythically worse than it actually was. Which I'm assuming all of the horrible things that people have pointed out about slavery are in fact true. And there are all kinds of horrible things that people have pointed out.
Right.
So
Okay, let me. Yeah.
sometimes people will say, like the quackademic agents of the world will say,
Right.
you know, but that was only a small number of slaves. And most slaves didn't get that kind of treatment. I think if you're living in a situation where you know that kind of treatment could happen, I think is probably a level of terror that most people don't want to live with.
Right.
Even just things like, you know, they can split your family up at will is pretty terrorizing.
So it's funny. Okay. So in Black Rednecks and White Liberals,
He doesn't make this argument in Black Rednecks.
he doesn't make this argument. He makes an argument that Pearl or someone stupid could brain fuck themselves into coming away and saying something very stupid that Nick Flint does. He makes the argument that there is a myth regarding slavery, which is that the myth is slavery was primarily one racial group enslaving another racial group. He talks about how through most of human history, it was people of the same or similar racial groups enslaving each other. It was only when technology grew great enough that they could start going to far enough places that they started enslaving people of other races and other, ethnic groups.
That is nowhere near saying slavery is made mythically worse than it actually was.
I understand.
In Black Rednecks and White Liberals, he's saying specifically that whites were slaves as well.
Yes. Yeah. He's saying that specifically the idea that slavery only existed among
interracial
one race
groups
enslaving another race. Yeah, interracial
is
groups
false. Most of the slavery in the world is the same the same race enslaving other people of their own race. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because she obviously misunderstood this or heard someone else misunderstand this, because he does the myth thing. This is where she's talking about. He brings up the whole thing with the roots person in this section of the book and talks about the myth, but he's talking about, again, only in regards to the myth of like the race thing.
Whites. He's talking about the myth of whites only enslaving blacks.
Right.
Yeah. That's not talking.
Right.
So it's odd. Okay, so it is from that book. Yeah, he does not make this argument in that book at all, and it would completely jump out to me if he did make that argument. No. And I would no longer recommend that book to people like I constantly do.
Right. Though I don't think Thomas Sowell is being out even remotely fair, though, when he criticizes the creator of the Roots, Alex Haley, when they say the quote is, and I'd be very curious what the full quote is because he only has like a little section of it. He says, challenged on the historical accuracy of Roots, Haley said, "I tried to give my people a myth to live by." Well, the historical accuracy of what element of it, though? What, like, specifically are we talking about here? Because I don't think the Roots guy. I mean, I seen Roots a million years ago. I don't remember them making some point about slavery and Roots being entirely just white people enslaving black people, and that was it. Well, I'm trying to remember.
I don't think the depictions in Roots were factually incorrect either.
Well, that's why I'm curious. What are they talking about? Are factually inaccurate? Like, maybe I could look it up. Roots enslavement scene, because I thought in Roots you see like black people enslave Kunta Kinte, and he's sold by other Africans. So I'm curious as to what is the issue that he has specifically with Roots.
Yeah, you see that in Roots.
I thought so.
I mean, I haven't seen it in a million years, but it is the black slavers that sell them to the
no, I just looked up on Google. It's black slavers kidnap him and sell him. There's a white guy there. So maybe there's like a white. Oh, okay. Wait, here it is. So we have actually, it's kind of funny. He's enslaved by a very multiracial group of people.
Oh, he is. Okay.
So maybe that's the complaint. There's a black guy, a white guy, and a Middle Eastern guy.
So okay, that's probably
But
the
everyone's
complaint.
involved. It's like,
The complaint in rednecks and white liberals is that their progressives are promoting myths that demonize white people in ways that are historically and factually incorrect. But complaining about that myth is far different than saying
it wasn't as bad. Yeah.
slavery was
Yes.
not as bad for blacks as it obviously was. So
Of course. Well, and yeah, it's absurd that she's saying this. Let's understand. She either like kind of half heard this, or someone explained it to her and they didn't explain to it properly, or whatever. So,
right.
right.
Yeah, the to create anti-white stereotypes, they've made this myth that whites are the only ones
Sure.
participating in this.
Right.
Yeah.
But then to create anti-black stereotypes, you have some people who are trying to say, well, slavery wasn't so bad.
Right. Totally.
Like, well, I mean, what are we talking about here? Really? And obviously, to be specifically, we're talking about the chattel slavery that blacks face in America. Obviously,
Yeah.
slavery throughout the years has had many different sort of permutations, some
Yeah.
significantly worse than others. So,
So do you agree with that premise that slavery was embellished, or no?
I think that there are parts that are under embellished and there are parts that are over embellished. I think it just depends what we're
That's
talking
so
about.
interesting. I've got to know what was over embellished about slavery. Just like one example, I'm dying to know.
Yeah, I just rather, I mean, I was talking about a book that I read, and I think to understand the context, you'd have to read the book.
But you just said some parts were embellished, some parts were under embellished.
I just, again,
Are you retracting that?
I'd really just rather not.
Okay. Dude, no, but slavery being embellished, that's so interesting. I don't know how you embellish it.
There are certain facts that we're not allowed to talk about.
Like what? I would love to. We're doing the taboos.
No,
We're mixing it up. It's
just-
red pill, baby.
Look
Let's
at
see
it.
the
Red
world as
pill,
it is.
baby.
Taboo topics.
I genuinely want to know how it's embellished.
Yeah.
What can't we talk about?
I'm dying. I'm actually dying.
I
to
mean, I
know,
could show
too.
you the video I was quoting, but it's just, I'd rather not get into this. So,
Wait a second. It went from I read a book to now it's a video I was quoting.
he probably saw the video that I pulled up when I Google searched Thomas Sowell and slavery,
Oh, really?
which is an excerpt from Black Rednecks and White Liberals that I was scanning through the transcript to see what his argument was.
That's a great book. It's a really great. Have you read that book?
No,
It's a good book. You
I
should
read
check
his
it out.
housing crash book and it triggered me. So
All
Sounds
right.
like a blue pilled attitude to me.
yeah. I was kind of hoping this was like a good faith interview.
Wait,
It
what's
doesn't-
bad faith? I'm literally showing you clips of you saying stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. What about this interview has been bad faith?
I just think you're kind of trying to push an agenda and you're not. Yeah, I just think you're trying to
But
push
that's a clip of you saying that. You can disavow it. That'd be super easy to say I was wrong.
Interview where I'm quoting somebody. Like if you watch the full
Misquoting somebody. Our beloved Thomas Sowell. You bitch. That's so awful.
yep. That's pretty bad.
Thomas Sowell.
He's
A
misquoting
black author.
a black author
Right.
to a white nationalist.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
The slavery was, kind of made it worse than it was. Like, well, that's not what he said. but okay.
Terrible. Terrible. You should disavow it, Pearl.
Right.
This is a good opportunity to disavow it. But see, this is the thing. I'm wondering, like, how much overlap does she have with the Nick Fuentes audience? How many of those guys are red pillars? I don't know.
Right.
Like, I feel like you get to 1 million subs because you're doing some major ass kissing. of some audience, right?
I'd believe that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, come on, she's snookering up to that white nationalist audience. She doesn't want to send them the wrong message here.
Whole interview, I am quoting somebody, and now you're trying to pin me down about a topic that I don't dive into.
Hold on.
So it's like,
Hold on,
like that's not the point of my channel.
Okay,
Like,
so
the point
it's
of my channel isn't.
I
like,
know,
I'm
but you
quoting-
said it. How is that bad faith? Hold on, let me
Okay,
see.
because I was talking about how the founder of the Thomas Sowell talks about how the guy that made Roots talked about how it was a myth for his people to live by.
Okay.
That's what the guy who made Roots said, Alex Haley.
Okay.
So, and I can't even talk about that on a podcast without being canceled by the internet.
Yeah, but mythology, you know, myth doesn't necessarily mean it's a lie, right? Just because mythology is like a culture,
right, but
a
I'm
history.
saying that doesn't mean the way it's depicted in the movie was how it actually happened.
I mean, myth does kind of mean it's untrue. I mean, unless he believes in Greek mythology.
Sure. Well, myth, yeah, right. But you could, right. But it depends what the context is, because you could say something like, that's why I want to know what I'm trying to find the original quote that Alex Haley said. Because if he says, I want Roots to be a myth for African Americans to understand, you could say like George Washington, you know, like a lot of things like regarding George Washington and the founding fathers and how like they kind of formed the country, like that's a myth, right? It's not like 100% real. It's kind of like we have this kind of like hyper realized, hyper exaggerated version of the founding fathers. That's kind of like the myth that Americans hold in their minds, right? You could say that slavery and Roots is supposed to be kind of like that version of a myth. Like not every person is going to be enslaved the way Kunta Kinte is. Not every person is going to go through the experiences that Kunta Kinte is, but it's supposed to be sort of like the slavery myth that, you know, that he wanted all African Americans to be able to kind of like hold in their mind as kind of like the platonic form, if you will, of what slavery was for Black people in America.
Right.
Right.
Myths, I looked it up. It says a traditional story accepted as history serves to explain the worldview of a people.
Well, see, that's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting.
Because that would be even not fictional at all. It's supposed to be like history.
Well, it's agnostic on whether it's fictional or true.
Right. Well, he like a good example of this is it's a myth, is part of the Jewish cultural mythos or Jewish historical mythos that the Jews were enslaved by the Egyptians.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that was a myth that was passed down for, you know, thousands of years. And only recently they're like, I don't know if there's any evidence to back up that claim.
Right. Yeah. I had no idea that myth was agnostic on the truth value.
I didn't either.
But I
That's very
guess
interesting.
that's the case. So
that's very
interesting.
And that's what he was talking about on the book. But again, I was quoting a book and you're trying to like pin me down on quoting a book.
Let me watch this again and see if I'm doing that.
Stuff.
She even says in the clip, though, that slavery is horrible. So she should just lean on that talking right now.
Right. Well, I think she does. But the question is, well, then what specifically was she talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Here's what I think happened. Okay. And I'd be curious. Maybe I should have done this to bring up the full clip. Because it sounds like she's just trying to do some little bit of simping to Fuentes.
Right.
And Fuentes' audience. And she doesn't really have a real point there.
She's loving it.
Right.
Fuentes is loving it. Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Didn't she get in trouble for talking to Fuentes? Is this when she talked to Fuentes and got in trouble? I don't know. I never watched
I don't know, but I could believe it.
Look, we have to track that down.
I can believe it based on this clip.
Rollo gave her a hard time for talking to Fuentes.
Right, because I don't think, it's not good. You know, Rollo is...
It's not good PR for Red Pill, yeah.
Right, Rollo's not stupid. He's like, why the fuck would we want to tie Red Pill in with, like, race nationalism?
Right. Look, they all want trad con wives.
Too, because that's literally the founder of, or the guy who made Roots said I wanted a myth for my people to live by.
Yeah.
So they often, but that's what they do is they embellish.
So then you say, but here's what they do.
And I'm not trying to say it wasn't horrible.
I'm not trying to say it wasn't horrible.
Right. But they want to make it like more horrible.
But they want to make it more horrible.
That they can control people.
So that they can control people.
Right, but
Nick Fuentes agrees, by the way.
Wait, oh my gosh. 5 minutes before I say Sowell talks about this in his book. So I'm communicating in the interview that I'm quoting an author.
You're not being honest. You say they do this to. Okay, so you disavow. Just disavow it then. That's easy. Just say I don't think slavery was embellished. I mean, that's super easy.
In the book, Thomas Sowell is saying that they want to blame slavery on the whites. That's the argument that he's making. And he's saying you can't necessarily blame slavery on the whites.
Right.
It's just not like a categorical thing you can do. Whites are the only ones responsible for slavery when whites have enslaved whites, blacks have enslaved blacks. That's the point that Thomas Sowell is not making an argument that slavery wasn't abhorrent, evil, and terrible.
Right. Obviously. Right. Okay, I found the full quote in the video that she probably is referencing. It doesn't even have Thomas Sowell's full quote because he actually explains specifically what he's referring to. He says, Roots has a white man leading a slave raid in West Africa where Kunta Kinte...
See, we nailed it. We totally nailed it.
I know we did. Was captured, looking bewildered at the chains put on him as he was led away in bondage. Moreover, the village elders likewise appeared perplexed by the sight of these white men who were carrying their people away. And he's saying that that's not... And he's complaining that that's not accurate, that in West Africa was a center of slave trading far before the white men arrived and, continued, afterwards. And that was all he was talking about. He says the myth that he was complaining about was the gross misconception that slavery was about white people enslaving black people. So when he was talking about he was criticizing the myth of Roots, he was specifically talking about this one aspect of it.
Yeah, exactly. He's not talking about the act of slavery. He's talking about
he's not talking about the
who's
depiction of
responsible.
he's not talking about the depiction of people's behavior once they were enslaved. Yeah.
Yes.
Easy. That's like a layup. Do you agree? You know what I mean? It's like just say you don't think slavery was embellished.
I think there are certain facts that you're not allowed to talk about. I don't really want to talk about it.
Yeah, what are those certain facts though, Pearl? I mean, I'm a little on Ethan's side here. It's like obviously she doesn't know the situation here. So does she believe in her heart of hearts that slavery was not that bad and that it was made to seem worse? And
this
really
is what
it was
I would
all
guess.
just tea and crumpets?
This is what I would guess what I said. I think she was talking to Nick Fuentes. She was trying to simp a little bit to his audience.
Mm-hmm.
And so she just kind of like vaguely remembered some vague thing she heard about a myth in slavery and Thomas Sowell, and she kind of all like came out in a very stupid way. That'd be my guess.
But what does she think now, though? What is her position now? Does she believe that Roots, when they're beating Kunta Kinte within an inch of his life, she thinks, oh, that's all made up? Like, that's what I want to know.
Right. She's not going to answer that question.
Because we narrowed it down to very, like, the scenes of the movie, basically, that are inaccurate and are inaccurate in a way to create... to forward negative stereotypes that white people are racist, pieces of shit colonizers. That's the point of that.
Right. That was a uniquely white thing and a uniquely race thing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that Roots was what is a myth?
I again, there are certain facts you're not allowed to talk about, and I don't really feel like getting into it today.
Hi, you just listened to a clip from the Sitch and Adams show. If you like what you heard, you can listen to our live show right here on this channel on Sunday, starting at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you want, you can super chat us. We read $20 and up super chats on the show and then do a follow-up stream on the following Tuesday where we read the rest of the unread super chats and interact with fans of the show. Subscribe to this channel right here to listen to the live show or to listen to more of our awesome clips.